1 year after the fall of the Galactic Council, Director Sarah Chen stood on the observation deck of the newly constructed Harmony Station, watching ships from across the galaxy arrive and depart in peaceful commerce. The massive space station, built with combined technologies from dozens of species, orbited at the gravitational balance point between Earth and its moon, a symbol of cooperation in what had once been the most dangerous region of space. The morning reports. Director, her aide announced, handing her a data tablet containing updates from across the liberated galaxy. Chen scanned the information with satisfaction. The Vorthak species had successfully established 3 new colonies using human-shared terraforming technology. The silicon-based lithics were creating artificial worlds in previously uninhabitable systems. The Ethereal Collective had opened dimensional gateways that allowed instantaneous travel between distant regions of space. Any conflicts to report? Chen asked, though she already suspected the answer. Minor trade disputes between the crystalline entities and the methane breathers over shipping routes, her aide replied. But both sides requested human mediation, and Ambassador Rodriguez resolved it within hours. No violence, no threats, just negotiation. It had been the pattern for months now. Species that had been enemies under Council rule were discovering they could resolve differences through diplomacy, rather than warfare. Having equal access to advanced technologies removed most reasons for aggressive expansion or resource conflicts. Director, called out Communications Officer Park. We're receiving a priority transmission from the Architect Archive. Chen's attention sharpened. The archive was humanity's most closely guarded secret, not from other species, but because of what they had recently discovered within its quantum dimensions. On screen, Chen ordered. The holographic display materialized, showing Dr. Reese standing in the crystalline chamber that housed the Architect databanks. Her expression was a mixture of excitement and concern. Director, we've made a breakthrough in the archive's deepest files, Dr. Reese reported. We've found the reason why the Architects really left this galaxy. Chen felt a chill of apprehension. What did you find? The Architects didn't ascend to escape physical limitations, Dr. Reese explained. They left because they detected something approaching from outside our galaxy. Something that makes the Council's oppression look like a minor inconvenience. The display shifted to show astronomical data that made Chen's blood freeze. Images of entire galaxies going dark, stellar formations being consumed by something that devoured light itself, civilizations vanishing without trace as whatever approached consumed everything in its path. The Architects called them the Devourers, Dr. Reese continued, a form of existence that feeds on conscious thought and technological advancement. The more advanced a civilization becomes, the more attractive they are to this force. The Architects realized that any galaxy containing highly developed species would eventually draw the Devourer's attention. Chen stared at the data in horror. How long do we have? According to the archive's calculations, approximately 50 years before they reach our galaxy. The Architects left detailed warnings and instructions. What kind of instructions? Dr. Reese's expression grew grim. The only way to survive the Devourers is to become invisible to them. That means, she paused, struggling with the implications. That means suppressing technological development across the entire galaxy. Keeping all species at a primitive level where they don't generate the kind of consciousness energy that attracts the Devourers. The implications hit Chen like a physical blow. You're saying the Council was right? That suppressing advancement was necessary for survival? Not exactly, Dr. Reese corrected. The Council didn't know about the Devourers. They suppressed development to maintain their own power. But the effect was the same. They kept the galaxy at a level that wouldn't attract attention from outside threats. Chen slumped into her chair as the full scope of the problem became clear. Humanity had liberated the galaxy and unleashed an unprecedented age of technological advancement. But in doing so, they had created exactly the kind of beacon that would draw the Devourers to their location. There has to be another solution, Chen said desperately. The Architects were the most advanced species in galactic history. Surely they found a better way than eternal suppression. Actually, Dr. Reese replied with a slight smile, they did. That's the other thing we found in the archive. New displays activated showing blueprints and schematics that hurt to look at directly. Technology so advanced they seem to bend the laws of reality just by existing. The Architects developed something called the Unity Protocol, Dr. Reese explained. Instead of suppressing individual civilizations, They found a way to merge all consciousness in the galaxy into a single unified entity. One that could defend itself against the Devourers while maintaining the benefits of technological advancement. Chen studied the complex diagrams with growing understanding and horror. You're talking about assimilating every thinking being in the galaxy into one collective consciousness? Not assimilating, Dr. Reese corrected. Unifying. Individual personalities would remain intact, but all species would share knowledge, experiences, and capabilities. Think of it as the ultimate form of cooperation. The communications officer called out urgently. Director, we're receiving emergency transmissions from monitoring stations throughout the galaxy. Something's happening. The main display shifted to show real-time feeds from across known space. On world after world, species that had been developing new technologies were suddenly stopping their work. Research facilities were shutting down, space construction projects were being abandoned, and entire civilizations were reverting to simpler ways of life. They know, Chen realized. Somehow other species have learned about the Devourer threat. Not learned, Dr. Reese corrected. They're feeling it. According to the archive, advanced consciousness becomes sensitive to the Devourer's approach as they get closer. Instinctive survival mechanisms are kicking in across the galaxy. Chen watched as the great renaissance of freedom and technology that humanity had initiated began to collapse under the weight of an instinctual fear that species couldn't even understand. The dream of a liberated galaxy was dying before her eyes. Director, her aide said quietly, General Morrison is requesting an immediate meeting with the global leadership. He says it's time to make the choice. Chen knew what choice he meant. Humanity could allow the galaxy to slide back into technological suppression, hoping that would be enough to avoid the Devourer's notice. They could attempt to implement the Architect's Unity Protocol, merging all galactic consciousness into a collective that could resist the threat. Or they could continue on their current path and hope that 50 years would be enough time to develop defenses against an enemy that had consumed entire galactic clusters. Tell the General we'll meet in 1 hour, Chen decided, and get me a direct line to every species leader in the galaxy. If we're going to face this threat, we need to face it together. As she prepared for what might be the most important decision in galactic history, Chen reflected on the irony of their situation. Humanity had defeated the Council's arrogance and freed the galaxy from oppression, only to discover that the oppression had been protecting them from something infinitely worse. The next few hours would determine whether the galaxy would choose freedom and risk extinction, unity and lose individuality, or suppression and abandon their dreams. And whatever they decided, humanity would bear the responsibility for the consequences of their choice to liberate a galaxy that might have been safer in chains. The greatest challenge was yet to come, and this time there was no ancient archive to guide them. They would have to find their own path through the darkness that approached from beyond the stars. 3 months after the battle that shattered the Galactic Council's fleet, the emergency session convened in the same grand chamber where the invasion of Earth had been approved with such arrogance. But now the circular hall felt more like a courtroom than a seat of power. Counselor Zethkri sat in chains made from human-designed restraint fields, his once proud scales now dull gray with defeat. Around him, the surviving council members faced representatives from over 300 species, former slaves, conquered peoples, and refugees who had suffered under council rule for millennia. At the center of the chamber stood General Morrison, no longer the elderly human who had seemed so helpless just months before. Surrounded by technology that made reality itself bend to his will, he commanded respect from beings who had once considered humans barely worth noticing. The trial of the Galactic Council begins, announced Judge Cathara, a member of the silicon-based lithic species whose homeworld had been strip-mined by the Council 8 centuries earlier. The charges are crimes against sapient life, technological suppression, forced relocation of populations, and genocide against 47 confirmed species. Zethkri raised his head with what remained of his former arrogance. This is a farce. The Council brought order to a chaotic galaxy. We prevented wars, maintained stability, and guided primitive species toward civilization. By destroying any species that showed independence, Morrison replied calmly, by suppressing technologies that could threaten your dominance, by committing genocide when entire civilizations refuse to submit to your authority. The evidence displays activated, showing records recovered from Council databases, images of worlds reduced to ash, species driven to extinction, technologies banned and their creators eliminated. The scope of the Council's oppression became clear in horrifying detail. Elder Thos, the ancient megalith, spoke in his grinding stone voice. We maintained order for millions of years. Without our guidance, the galaxy would have destroyed itself in wars and chaos. You maintained control, corrected another voice. Ambassador Silthek of the Ethereal Collective had been thought extinct for 2,000 years, but humans had found survivor communities hidden in deep space. You prevented progress, creativity, and growth because they threatened your power. Morrison gestured, and new displays showed the galaxy as it truly was under Council rule, stagnant, suppressed, with countless species held in technological bondage, while their resources were extracted to maintain the Council's dominance. The architects left us more than just technology, Morrison explained to the assembled representatives. They left us their complete historical records. We know what this galaxy was like before the Council took power. We know about the renaissance of sciences that you ended, the peaceful alliances you destroyed, the golden age of exploration you terminated because it threatened your authority. Counselor Yildana's 6 wings rustled with desperate anger. The architects were destroyed for good reason. Their technology was too dangerous, too unpredictable. They would have brought chaos to the entire galaxy. The architects ascended to a higher plane of existence, Morrison corrected. They chose to evolve beyond physical limitations. But before they left, they realized that species like the Council would suppress other civilizations from achieving similar growth. So they hid their knowledge where only worthy species could find it. Judge Cathara called for order as angry voices rose from the gallery. Beings who had suffered under Council rule for generations were finally getting the chance to confront their oppressors. The humans found our archive 50 years ago, Morrison continued, but they didn't immediately use it for conquest or domination. They spent decades studying, understanding, and preparing. They used architect technology to defend themselves and others, not to build an empire. Sethkri laughed bitterly. And what makes you think you're any different? Power corrupts all species eventually. Give it time, and humanity will become just as oppressive as the Council ever was. Morrison nodded thoughtfully. You might be right. That's why we're not keeping control of architect technology for ourselves. The chamber fell silent. Even the human delegation looked surprised. Every species in the galaxy will receive complete access to all architect knowledge, Morrison announced. Not just the peaceful technologies, but the dangerous ones as well. Every civilization will have the power to defend itself, to grow, to explore, to create. No single species will ever again be able to suppress the development of others. Counselor Nex clicked her mandibles in disbelief. You're giving away technology that makes you masters of the galaxy? Why? Because, Morrison replied simply, the architects were right. True civilization isn't about controlling others. It's about helping them reach their full potential. The galaxy doesn't need rulers. It needs gardeners. The displays showed new images. Human ships arriving at worlds throughout the galaxy, but not as conquerors. Human engineers working alongside local populations to rebuild devastated civilizations. Human scientists sharing knowledge freely, teaching formerly suppressed species how to use technologies they had been forbidden to develop. Ambassador Silthek floated forward, his ethereal form shimmering with emotion. In 2,000 years of exile, we never dared hope for such generosity. But why should we trust you? How do we know this isn't simply a more subtle form of control? Morrison smiled and gestured to the human delegation. Because we're giving you the tools to stop us if we ever try. Every species will have access to architect defensive technologies. If humanity ever becomes oppressive, the galaxy will have the power to defeat us just as we defeated the Council. The implications rippled through the chamber. A galaxy where every species had equal access to the most advanced technologies in existence. A galaxy where no single civilization could dominate others through superior weapons or knowledge. A galaxy where progress and creativity could flourish without fear of suppression. The sentence of this court, Judge Cathara announced, is dissolution of the Galactic Council and restitution to all harmed species. Council military assets will be distributed among liberated worlds. Council leaders will serve terms of community service helping to rebuild the civilizations they destroyed. Zethkri struggled against his restraints. This will lead to chaos. Without central authority, species will war against each other. The galaxy will tear itself apart. Maybe, Morrison admitted. But that will be their choice to make. Freedom includes the freedom to make mistakes. And we believe that most species, when given the chance, will choose cooperation over conflict. As the trial concluded and the former council leaders were led away, representatives from across the galaxy began forming new alliances, not based on domination and submission, but on mutual respect and shared goals. The ethereal collective offered to share their mastery of energy manipulation. The lithic species contributed their understanding of planetary engineering. The crystalline entities provided insights into quantum consciousness. Morrison watched the birth of a new galactic civilization with satisfaction. The humans had inherited the legacy of the architects, but they were using it to ensure that no species would ever again inherit a galaxy of oppression. General, asked one of his aides, what if Counselor Zethkri was right? What if this leads to wars and chaos? Morrison considered the question seriously. Then we'll deal with those problems when they arise. But I'd rather face the challenges of freedom than the certainty of tyranny. Outside the chamber, ships from hundreds of worlds were already departing to spread the news and share the new technologies. The galaxy was about to enter an age of unprecedented growth and exploration, and humanity had chosen to guide rather than rule. The Council's arrogance had led them to underestimate a primitive species with chemical rockets. That mistake had cost them their empire and freed a galaxy that had been suppressed for millions of years. And now that galaxy was about to discover what it could accomplish when every species was free to reach for the stars. The first salvo from the Council fleet lit up space like a new star being born. 900 ships fired simultaneously, unleashing enough destructive power to glass an entire planet. Antimatter torpedoes, quantum disruptors, and plasma cannons that could melt asteroids converged on the human fleet in a display of overwhelming firepower. Admiral Kexthor watched with satisfaction as the attack reached the enemy vessels. Nothing could survive such concentrated destruction. No matter what technology the humans possessed, they were about to learn the price of defying the Council. The weapons struck their targets in a brilliant explosion that temporarily blinded sensors across the battlefield. When the energy dissipated and the displays cleared, Kexthor stared in absolute disbelief. The human ships were completely unharmed. "Report," he barked at his tactical officer. "Sir, our weapons made contact, but—" The officer's voice trailed off as he struggled to understand his own readings. The human vessels seemed to have absorbed the energy. Our attacks didn't even scratch their hulls. On the communication channel, General Morrison's voice remained maddeningly calm. "Architect shield technology, Admiral. Your weapons are feeding power directly into our defensive systems. Thank you for the energy boost." Kexthor's mind reeled. Shields that could absorb and redirect energy attacks were theoretical at best. No species in the galaxy had ever achieved such technology. Not even the legendary architects according to Council historical records. "Sir?" His sensor operator called out urgently. "The human ships are charging weapon systems. Energy readings are... they're impossible. Each vessel is showing power outputs equivalent to our entire fleet." On the tactical display, the human ships began to glow with an inner light that seemed to bend space around them. Their weapon systems activated with a harmonic resonance that made the bridge crew's bones vibrate. "All ships, evasive maneuvers," Kexthor commanded. "Random dispersal pattern. Don't let them target multiple vessels." But the humans weren't targeting individual ships. Instead, their weapons systems synchronized into a single coordinated attack that seemed to encompass the entire battlefield. Energy beams that looked like concentrated starlight reached out across millions of kilometers with impossible precision. The first human weapons to fire weren't projectiles or energy blasts. They were gravity waves that distorted space itself. Council ships that had been accelerating away from Earth suddenly found themselves pulled backward, their engines fighting against invisible forces that treated the laws of physics like suggestions. "Gravitational manipulation," whispered the science officer. "They're using controlled gravity fields as weapons. Our engines can't compensate." The second wave of human attacks defied every principle of space combat that Kexthor had learned in 40 years of military service. Instead of targeting individual vessels, The human weapons seemed to target the quantum structure of matter itself. Council ships began to simply come apart, their atomic bonds dissolving as if the fundamental forces holding them together had decided to stop working. "Sir, we're losing ships," reported the tactical officer, his voice rising in panic. "The stellar dominance just disintegrated. The Iron Fist is breaking apart at the molecular level. The humans are somehow destroying the strong nuclear force in targeted areas." Kexthor watched his mighty fleet, the pride of Council, military power, being systematically dismantled by weapons that shouldn't exist. In less than 10 minutes, he had lost over 100 capital ships to attacks that his science officers couldn't even classify. "How?" he demanded. "How is this possible?" General Morrison's voice came over the comm again, now carrying a note of sadness. "The architects understood something that the Council never did, Admiral. Science isn't about controlling power. It's about understanding the fundamental nature of reality. When you truly comprehend how the universe works, you don't need bigger weapons. You just need to convince matter and energy to behave differently." A human dreadnought, easily twice the size of Kexthor's flagship, materialized directly beside the inevitable Dominion. The Admiral's shield should have automatically engaged. His point defense systems should have opened fire, but nothing happened. Every system on his ship had simply stopped working. "You're wondering why your weapons aren't firing," Morrison continued conversationally. "It's quite simple, really. We've convinced the electromagnetic fields in your ship's computer cores that they don't want to carry electrical current anymore. Your ship is now about as dangerous as a very large paperweight." Across the battlefield, the same thing was happening to hundreds of Council vessels. Systems that had functioned flawlessly for decades suddenly refused to operate. Weapons that had never misfired in their operational history simply shut down. Engines that could propel massive ships faster than light decided they no longer understood the concept of thrust. "This is impossible," Kexthor repeated, but the words sounded hollow even to him. The evidence was all around him. His fleet was being neutralized by technology so advanced that it might as well have been magic. "Not impossible, Admiral," Morrison replied. "Just improbable. The architects spent millions of years learning to work with the universe instead of against it. They discovered that when you truly understand quantum mechanics, consciousness, and the fundamental information structure of reality, you can make reality cooperate with your goals. The human ships moved through the disabled Council fleet like predators, through a herd of helpless prey. But instead of destroying the remaining vessels, they were doing something far more disturbing. They were studying them." "Sir," the communications officer reported with a shaking voice, "the humans are scanning our ships with some kind of quantum probe. They're downloading everything. Ship designs, weapons specifications, tactical databases, personnel records. They're copying our entire technological knowledge base." Kexthor felt something he had never experienced in decades of military service. Complete and utter defeat. Not just tactical defeat, but the kind of overwhelming superiority that made resistance meaningless. "Why?" he asked over the comm channel. "Why haven't you destroyed us?" Morrison's reply was immediate. "Because destruction was never our goal, Admiral. We didn't develop this technology to conquer or dominate. We developed it to defend ourselves and to end the Council's reign of suppression." On the tactical display, new contacts appeared. Ships were approaching from all over the galaxy. Not Council vessels, but craft belonging to species that Kexthor recognized as conquered peoples. Primitive civilizations that the Council had subdued or relocated over the millennia. "You see, Admiral," Morrison continued, "word travels fast in a galaxy full of oppressed species. When news spread that humanity had architect technology, every enslaved race in Council space started moving toward Earth. They want to be free, and now they have the power to achieve that freedom." The approaching ships numbered in the thousands, species that had been defeated centuries ago, their homeworld stripped of resources, their populations scattered to prison colonies, were returning with a force that dwarfed even the Council's mighty fleet. "This isn't just about Earth," Morrison explained. "This is about ending an empire built on technological suppression and forced stagnation. The Council has kept the galaxy primitive for millions of years, destroying any species that showed real promise. That era is over." Admiral Kexthor slumped in his command chair as the full scope of the disaster became clear. The invasion of Earth hadn't failed. It had triggered a galactic revolution. Every species the Council had conquered, enslaved, or eliminated was rising up simultaneously, and they were doing it with human support and architect technology. "What are your terms?" he asked, knowing that surrender was his only option. "Simple," Morrison replied. "The Council disbands immediately. All occupied worlds are returned to their original inhabitants. All suppressed technologies are released to every species in the galaxy. And you personally will stand trial for crimes against sapient life." Around him, Kexthor's bridge crew waited for orders that would never come. The greatest military force in galactic history had been defeated without firing a single effective shot. And the empire they served was about to collapse under the weight of its own oppression. The humans hadn't just won a battle. They had ended an age of galactic tyranny that had lasted longer than most stars burned. And they had done it with technology that turned the very foundations of physics into weapons against oppression. Admiral Kexthor stood on the bridge of the massive dreadnought Inevitable Dominion, watching the final preparations for what he expected to be the shortest military campaign in Galactic Council history. Around him, his bridge crew worked with the calm efficiency of professionals who had never known defeat. The human solar system appeared on the main display, a collection of primitive worlds orbiting an unremarkable yellow star. Intelligence reports had confirmed what the Admiral already knew. Humanity possessed no meaningful military technology. Their largest warships were laughably small, their weapons primitive, their defenses practically non-existent. "Status report," Kexthor commanded, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had conquered 12 star systems. "All fleet elements are in position." "Admiral," reported his tactical officer, 937 capital ships, 10,000 support craft, and 15 million ground troops ready for deployment. The humans' pathetic excuse for a space navy is concentrated around their third planet and its moon. Kexthor studied the tactical display. 53 human vessels, the largest, barely 800 meters long. His own flagship was over 15 kilometers from bow to stern, and carried more firepower than the entire human fleet combined. "They're not even trying to hide," observed his intelligence officer, a spidery arachnoid whose multiple eyes could process data streams simultaneously. "Their ships are broadcasting identification signals and maintaining standard orbital patterns. They're either supremely confident or completely oblivious to what's coming." "Probably both," Kexthor replied. "These humans have never faced a real military force. They think their primitive weapons give them some kind of protection." He gestured dismissively. "Begin long-range scanning. I want detailed information about their defensive capabilities before we commence the attack." The bridge fell silent, except for the hum of sophisticated sensors sweeping the human system. Within minutes, data began flooding in, and Kexthor smiled as he reviewed the pathetic results. "Confirmed, Admiral," the sensor operator reported. "Orbital defense platforms around the third planet armed with kinetic accelerators and chemical rockets. Energy output suggests basic fusion power cores. Their planetary shields are barely adequate to stop meteorites, much less military-grade weapons. And their fleet? Standard chemical rockets for propulsion with primitive fusion drives on the larger vessels. Weapons appear to be projectile-based with some basic energy systems. No sign of antimatter weapons, quantum disruptors, or gravity manipulation technology. We're looking at technology that's at least 5 centuries behind our standard armaments." Kexthor allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. This would be even easier than predicted. "Communications, open a channel to the human leadership. Let's give them a chance to surrender before we demonstrate the futility of resistance." The comm officer's tentacles danced across his console. "Channel open, Admiral." "People of Earth," Kexthor began, his voice being broadcast across the human system. "I am Admiral Kexthor of the Galactic Council Defense Force. Your species has been deemed a threat to galactic stability. You will immediately stand down all military forces and prepare for relocation to designated containment worlds. This is your only warning." The response came within minutes, transmitted from the planet's surface. A human appeared on the screen, an elderly male with gray hair and calm eyes that showed no fear. "Admiral Kexthor," the human said, "I am General Morrison, Supreme Commander of Earth Defense Forces. Your ultimatum is rejected. We will defend our world with everything we have." Kexthor laughed, a sound like grinding metal. "General Morrison, you face the largest military fleet in galactic history. Your 50 ships against nearly 1,000 of ours. Surrender now and your deaths will be quick." "Admiral," Morrison replied with infuriating calm, "I think there's been a misunderstanding. You seem to believe you have a numerical advantage." "Believe? I have confirmed intelligence on your pathetic fleet strength." Morrison smiled slightly. Your intelligence is accurate about the ships you can see, but perhaps you should scan a little deeper. Kexthor frowned and gestured to his sensor operator. Expand the sweep. Full spectrum analysis. What appeared on the displays made the Admiral's blood run cold. The space around Earth, which had appeared nearly empty moments before, suddenly lit up with massive energy signatures. Ships began materializing out of what should have been empty space. Vessels of impossible size and design that had been completely invisible to his sensors. That's not possible," whispered the tactical officer. The human ships were enormous, some over 20 kilometers long, their hulls made of materials that seemed to bend light around them. They moved with impossible grace, appearing to slide through space without any visible propulsion system. Energy readings from their weapon systems were off the charts. 237 capital ships now visible, Admiral, the sensor operator reported in a shaking voice. Energy outputs they're beyond our measurement capabilities. These vessels are using technology we don't understand. Kexthor stared at the display in disbelief. Where did they come from? Our intelligence was perfect. How did we miss an entire fleet? On the communication screen, General Morrison's smile grew wider. You missed them because they were cloaked using technology your species abandoned as impossible millions of years ago. Technology you've worked very hard to ensure no one else ever developed. What are you talking about? Kexthor demanded. We know about the architects, Admiral. We know what the Council did to them, and we know what you've been doing to every other species that showed real promise. But you made one crucial mistake. The human ships began moving into attack formation with fluid precision that made Kexthor's veteran crews look clumsy by comparison. Each vessel radiated power signatures that dwarfed his flagship. The architects didn't just disappear, Morrison continued. They left behind gifts for those worthy to inherit their legacy. 50 years ago, we found one of their archives. We've been preparing for this moment ever since. Admiral Kexthor's mind raced as he processed the implications. The architects, the mythical species whose technology had been lost for millions of years. Every council species knew the legends, but no one believed any trace of their civilization still existed. Impossible, he breathed. The architect's technology was destroyed. The council made sure of that. The council made sure that you believed it was destroyed, Morrison corrected. But the architects were far cleverer than your ancestors realized. They hid their greatest gifts in quantum dimensions, waiting for a species intelligent enough and worthy enough to find them. The human fleet had completed its deployment. Kexthor's tactical displays showed energy readings that made no sense. According to his instruments, some of the human ships were channeling more power than a small star. Admiral, his communications officer called out urgently. We're receiving surrender demands from the human fleet. They're ordering us to stand down immediately or face destruction. Kexthor almost laughed at the absurdity. His fleet still outnumbered the humans by nearly 4-1, and no matter what technology they possessed, numbers had to count for something. All ships attack formation, he ordered. We'll show these upstart humans what real military power looks like. Target their largest vessels first. Sir, his weapons officer reported, our targeting systems can't get a lock. The human ships they're phasing in and out of normal space. Our computers can't track them. On the display, the human vessels began to move. But they didn't accelerate like normal ships. They simply appeared in new positions instantaneously, as if distance had no meaning to them. Quantum teleportation. Morrison's voice came over the comm. Another gift from the architects. Admiral, this is your final warning. Stand down your forces or we will demonstrate why the Galactic Council has spent millions of years trying to suppress architect technology. Kexthor's hands clenched into fists. He had never retreated from a battle in his life, and he wasn't going to start now regardless of what impossible technology these humans possessed. All ships, he commanded, open fire. Show them the power of the Council. The largest space battle in galactic history was about to begin. And Admiral Kexthor was about to learn that sometimes legends were real, and sometimes the primitive species you underestimated possessed power that could shatter empires. Deep beneath the Swiss Alps, the emergency session of the United Earth Defense Council was already in progress when Director Sarah Chen received the final confirmation. The message, transmitted through channels so secret that most governments didn't know they existed, contained intelligence that would have been impossible to believe just hours earlier. Ladies and gentlemen, Chen announced to the assembled leaders, I can now confirm what Agent Blackbird has reported. The Galactic Council has voted unanimously to invade Earth. Their fleet will arrive in 7 days. The underground chamber erupted in controlled chaos. President Martinez of the American Union slammed his fist on the table. Chancellor Hoffman's face went pale. Prime Minister Okafor began rapidly typing on her secure tablet. Only General Morrison remained calm, his weathered face showing no surprise. "How many ships?" asked Fleet Admiral Zhang, her voice steady despite the circumstances. "Intelligence suggests approximately 900 capital ships plus support craft," Chen replied. "They expect complete victory within 48 hours. 48 hours? Chancellor Hoffman laughed bitterly. "Our entire space navy has maybe 50 ships that could fight a determined fishing fleet. How are we supposed to face 900 alien warships?" General Morrison finally spoke. "Because they don't know what we've really been building for the past 30 years. The room fell silent. Everyone present had security clearance high enough to know about the black budget programs, the unexplained expenditures, the projects that existed in files marked with classifications beyond top secret. But Morrison's tone suggested something far beyond what any of them had imagined. "Director Chen, activate Protocol Omega," Morrison ordered. Chen hesitated for just a moment, then placed her palm on a scanner that emerged from her console. "Protocol Omega activated. All present personnel are now bound by absolute classification. General Morrison, the floor is yours." Morrison stood slowly, his old bones creaking. 50 years ago, we received our first confirmed evidence that we were not alone in the universe. A damaged alien probe was recovered from the Antarctic ice. It took us decades to understand what we had found. But once we did, everything changed. A holographic display materialized in the center of the room, showing what appeared to be a metallic fragment covered in crystalline growths. This probe belonged to a species called the Architects. They vanished from the galaxy millions of years ago, but they left behind something remarkable. A complete technological archive hidden in quantum dimensions. When we finally cracked their storage system, we gained access to scientific knowledge that made our greatest achievements look like cave paintings. President Martinez leaned forward. "Are you telling us we've had alien technology for 50 years? "Not just alien technology," Morrison corrected. "Architect technology, the species that the current Galactic Council fears above all else. You see, the Architects didn't disappear, they ascended. They evolved beyond physical existence, but not before leaving behind tools for species they deemed worthy of inheriting their legacy." The hologram shifted, revealing images of massive construction projects hidden in asteroid belts and on the dark side of the moon. Shipyards that boggled the mind, manufacturing facilities that defied physics, weapons that looked like they belonged in science fiction. "For 30 years, we've been building in secret," Morrison continued. "Not the primitive warships the aliens have observed, but vessels constructed with architect technology, ships that can manipulate gravity, bend space-time, and channel energies that would make stars jealous." Admiral Zhang stared at the display in amazement. "How many ships are we talking about?" "Currently operational, 237 dreadnoughts, each one capable of destroying an entire enemy fleet. But that's just the beginning." Morrison smiled grimly. "We've been preparing for this moment since we first learned we weren't alone. Earth has defenses that make our entire planet a fortress." Director Chen activated another display, showing a cross-section of Earth itself. Project Gaia. We've spent decades installing architect technology throughout the planet's crust. Energy distribution networks, gravitational manipulation arrays, atmospheric processing systems. If needed, we can turn our entire world into a weapon. Chancellor Hoffman struggled to process what she was hearing. "This is impossible. How could such massive projects remain secret?" "The same way we've hidden first contact for 50 years, Morrison replied. "Compartmentalization, misdirection, and the fact that most people see only what they expect to see. When your space program launches a communications satellite, no one questions whether it might actually be deploying defensive systems. When we build deep-sea research facilities, no one asks why they require such exotic materials." The general gestured, and the hologram showed a timeline stretching back decades. Every major construction project, every scientific breakthrough, every technological advancement that seemed surprisingly rapid. It was all part of the preparation. "We've been getting ready for this war since before most of you were born." Prime Minister Okafor finally found her voice. But why didn't you tell us? Our governments are people, they have a right to know. Because, Chen interjected, knowledge of alien contact would have caused global panic, economic collapse, and probably several wars as nations fought over access to architect technology. We made the difficult choice to prepare in secret, knowing that one day we would have to reveal everything. Morrison nodded. The architects left us more than just technology. They left us a warning. The Galactic Council isn't what it appears to be. They style themselves as benevolent guardians of galactic civilization, but they're actually suppressors of advancement. Any species that shows too much potential, too much curiosity, or too much independence gets eliminated or enslaved. They maintain their power, Chen continued, by keeping other species primitive and dependent. They've done this for millions of years, wiping out dozens of potential galactic powers. The architects were the last species to challenge them directly. Until now, Morrison added with satisfaction. Admiral Zhang studied the technical specifications scrolling past on the display. These ships, they're beyond anything in our public knowledge. How do we even crew them? We've been training crews in deep black programs for decades, Morrison explained. Pilots selected for psychological profiles and genetic markers that make them compatible with architect interfaces. Engineers who've spent their entire careers working with technology, they were told, was experimental fusion systems or advanced computer networks. We have 12,000 personnel ready to deploy immediately. And our strategy? Asked President Martinez. Morrison's expression grew hard. The aliens expect to face a primitive, helpless species. Instead, they're going to encounter technology that their ancestors believed was impossible. We're not going to simply defend Earth. We're going to shatter their entire understanding of what humans are capable of. The Council bases their power on technological superiority, Chen added. When word spreads that humans not only defeated their invasion fleet but did so using architect technology, it will destabilize their entire empire. Species they've oppressed for millennia will rise up, and their carefully maintained order will collapse. General Morrison walked to the center of the room, his voice carrying the weight of decades of preparation. Gentlemen, ladies, in 7 days the Galactic Council will arrive at Earth expecting to find frightened primitives with chemical rockets and nuclear weapons. Instead, they're going to discover that humanity has inherited the legacy of the most advanced species in galactic history. The room remained silent as the implications sank in. Earth wasn't just going to survive the invasion. It was going to announce humanity's arrival as a galactic power in the most dramatic way possible. One more thing, Morrison said quietly. The architects didn't just leave us technology. They left us a responsibility. We're not just defending Earth, we're liberating the galaxy. The grand chamber of the Galactic Council fell silent as Counselor Zethkri's 4 arms gestured dramatically toward the holographic display. Earth hung there like a blue marble, slowly rotating in the artificial light. Around the circular chamber, representatives from 47 different species watched with varying degrees of interest and disgust. This primitive world has become a problem, Zethkri announced, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had never been challenged. The Vorthak Counselor's scale shifted from deep purple to angry red as he spoke. Their expansion into space threatens the natural order we have maintained for millennia. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the chamber. The crystalline delegate's body chimed like wind bells, while the gaseous Nethri representative pulsed with approving colors. Only a few remained silent, their expressions unreadable. They have no right, continued another voice. Counselor Yildana of the Seraphic Empire rose gracefully, her 6 wings spreading wide. We have observed these humans for barely 2 centuries. They have not earned their place among civilized species. Their violent nature, their chaotic governments, their primitive technology. They are a cancer that will spread if left unchecked. The hologram shifted, showing human spacecraft, crude vessels compared to the elegant bioships of the Council races, but they were spreading quickly through nearby systems. Mining operations, research stations, even small colonies had appeared in sectors that had remained untouched for thousands of years. Elder Thos, the ancient megalith whose stone body had witnessed the rise and fall of countless civilizations, spoke with a voice like grinding mountains. In my long existence, I have seen many species emerge from their birth worlds. Most learn their place quickly. These humans, they act as if the galaxy belongs to them. Exactly, Zethkri slammed one fist against his podium. They refused to acknowledge our authority. When our diplomatic vessels approached their ships, they demanded to speak to our leaders as equals. Equals, as if a species that only achieved faster-than-light travel 50 years ago could stand beside those who have mastered the stars for millions of years. The chamber erupted in indignant sounds. Screeches, howls, harmonic resonances, and electromagnetic pulses filled the air as the assembled representatives expressed their outrage. How dare these upstart humans presume equality with their betters? Counselor Nex of the Hive Collective raised one of her insectoid arms for silence. When the chamber quieted, she spoke in the clicking language that was automatically translated for all present. The humans pose a more serious threat than simple disrespect. Our scouts report that they have begun asking questions. Dangerous questions. What kind of questions? Asked Yildana, though her tone suggested she already suspected the answer. They want to know why certain systems are marked as forbidden. They question why we maintain uninhabited buffer zones. They have begun mapping gravitational anomalies and energy signatures that we have kept hidden for good reason. Nex's compound eyes glittered with concern. If they continue this path, they may discover things that must remain secret. A heavy silence fell over the chamber. Every representative knew what Nex meant, though none would speak of it directly. There were things in the galaxy that the Council had sworn to keep hidden, ancient threats that slumbered in forgotten corners of space. The humans, with their endless curiosity and reckless exploration, might stumble upon powers that could doom them all. Then we are decided, Zethkri declared. The human problem must be solved before it becomes a catastrophe. I call for a formal vote on Resolution 847, the complete pacification of the Sol system and the relocation of human populations to designated containment worlds. Seconded, came Yildana's immediate response, Elder. Thos shifted his massive stone form. The proposal is clear. Military action to neutralize human space capabilities, followed by forced relocation. All in favor? Hands, claws, tentacles, and energy fields rose throughout the chamber. The vote was overwhelming. Only 3 representatives abstained, and none dared vote against. The human fate was sealed? Excellent, Zethkri smiled, revealing rows of sharp teeth. Admiral Kexthor, you will coordinate the operation. How long do you estimate for complete victory? The military commander, a towering reptilian being covered in battle scars, stood at attention. Counselor, human military capabilities are laughably primitive. Their largest warships are smaller than our patrol boats. Their weapons technology is centuries behind our standard armaments. I estimate complete victory within 48 standard hours. 48 hours? Yildana sounded almost disappointed. I had hoped for at least some entertainment from this campaign. Admiral Kexthor's scales darkened with professional pride. Honored Counselor, we will bring overwhelming force. 3 full battle fleets. Over 900 capital ships supported by 10,000 fighters and assault craft. The humans have perhaps 50 ships they generously call warships. It will be a demonstration, not a battle. And their planetary defenses? Asked Elder Thos. Minimal. Some orbital platforms with kinetic weapons, primitive missile systems, energy barriers that our weapons will pierce like tissue paper. Their ground forces are numerous but armed with chemical propellants and basic energy weapons. A single Council battle group could pacify their entire home world. Counselor Nex clicked her mandibles thoughtfully. What of their nuclear weapons? Intelligence reports suggest they possess thousands of these devices. Admiral Kexthor's laugh was a harsh rasp. Nuclear weapons, Counselor? We mastered nuclear fire when their species was learning to use stone tools. Our ship's shields are designed to withstand stellar radiation and antimatter bombardment. Human nuclear weapons will be like throwing pebbles at a mountain. Then it is settled, Zethkri announced with satisfaction. The operation will commence in 1 standard week. That will give our propaganda division time to prepare the justification broadcasts. We will paint this as a mercy mission, saving a dangerous young species from their own destructive impulses. As the council session ended and representatives began filing out, few noticed the small shadowy figure that had observed the entire proceeding from a hidden alcove. Agent Silthar of the Information Guild had heard enough. The spy slipped away through maintenance tunnels, already composing the encrypted message that would change everything. The council had made their decision with arrogance and contempt, never questioning whether their intelligence about humanity was complete or accurate. They saw primitive weapons and crude ships and assumed they understood everything about human capabilities. They were about to learn that assumptions could be deadly, and that sometimes the most dangerous enemy was the one you underestimated. In 1 week, the greatest military force in galactic history would descend upon Earth. Expecting an easy victory over a helpless primitive species, they had no idea what was waiting for them.